So we are in Tzidkas Hatzadik, Os Mem Ches, and the last few Osios, Mem Hey, Mem Vav, Mem Zayin, have been classic Rabbi Tzadok of turning things upside down and inside out, and Averas into mitzvos, Midos Rois into Midos Tovos, and he taught us how chutzpah can be a very good thing, and gaiva could be a very important thing, and on the contrary, kol hagadol mechaveira yitzrei gadol mimenu, the bigger neshama you have, the more yetzer hara you have in that neshama, because you need that in order to grow. That's your ambition, that's your gaiva, but it's, ad kedei kach, that just to say a little vart here before we begin, that Reb Tzadok in the world of Chassidus, Reb Tzadok was called one of the three, I believe, Sanigoria Shel Yisrael. He was one of the big protectors or defenders of Israel. Of course, the Barditchever and the Izbitcher and Reb Tzadok, and it could be that Reb Tzadok was Nechet of the Gra, and he wasn't. That's where he came from. He was a Granik, and ended up in Poland, in Lublin, and became a chassid of the Izbitcher. He learned so much from him, but he said that most of what he learned from him, Reb Tzadok writes, most of what he learned from his Rabbi the Izbitcher, he learned on one night. For the first night, Reb Tzadok was one of the biggest Talmidei Chacham in the world. But probably what he learned from him is how to turn everything upside down and show him a new derech halimud, if you will, where what you think is bad is not necessarily bad; it's good. It could be very good, and how to be dan klal Yisrael l'kav schus, and how to understand why something that seems bad is sometimes good. And most important thing about that is to give ourselves that kind of benefit of the doubt, because where we feel like why do I do that? Why am I like that? So it could be, as not Musar, he's saying it Kabbalistically, it could be that's like the greatest, that's a sign of the greatest thing that we have going for us, the chutzpah, the gaiva. So after he tells us all of that, in Mem Ches, he tells us there's like a bit of another turnaround within the turnaround. He says, Mem Ches, lo yischaber im Rishoyim. Don't have anything to do with Rishoyim. Now, we just said that these Rishoyim are really like great guys. Like, why should we have nothing to do with evil people? But he says, lo yischaber im Rishoyim, afilu lasois mitzvah. Even if you're doing a mitzvah together with the Rishonim. So it means to say that somebody is a good person, a tzaddik, but in order to get the mission accomplished for some kind of a mitzvah, or even for a mitzvah of the whole Klal Yisrael, you need some Russia money, or some power, or some clout, or you need something from Rishonim. So, and they're Loy L'Shem Shemayim, and their midos harois, but this kind of like Machiavellian approach sometimes can get things done, yeah. So Reb Tzadok says that now, even though I just extolled the whole inyan of bad mitos, lo yischaber im Rishoyim, and he says the reason I know this, it says in Pirkei Avos, right? Al tischaber im Rasha. Va'afilu lasos mitzvah v'chein hu mefarsh. The al tischaber im Rasha doesn't teach you that if it's for a mitzvah, al tischaber im Rasha, that you don't need Reb Tzadok's limud here. For that you have a Mefurish Chazal. But al tischaber im Rasha afilu lasos mitzvah. For that you need Reb Tzadok's teaching now. That even if you're doing a good thing, you don't do it. The end doesn't justify the means. And this has to be compatible with everything we've learned. So there's a context here. But even independently, the end doesn't justify the means. I shouldn't say it that way. It's even more. It's not just that the end doesn't justify the means. It's not even a means. It's just a mischaber im Rasha. Like, I'm not necessarily doing anything wrong, except that I'm partnering with the Russia. And just doesn't justify means okay, but don't be Machal Shabbos, don't worship Avodah Zarah. That's and justifying the mean. I'm just being mischaber with the Russia. He's got the clout, he's got the money, whatever he's got. The Mechilta darshans on the word bischabercha. I'll show you what this means. Important story, can't skip it. The story is mentioned in Sefer Malachim. It was around the time of Eliyahu Navi, next really generation. Important to remember that Eliyahu Navi was a Navi for the Malchei Yisrael. Kings of Israel liked him, didn't like him, wanted to kill him, but he was ministering to the kings of Israel as opposed to other Nevi'im, which were saying Nevuah to the Malchei Yehuda, to the kings of Yehuda. I don't know if they got together and schmoozed this out, Eliyahu Navi and whoever the Navi on the other side was, nor do I know if these two kings ever get together one way or the other, but there was Malchus Yisrael, Malchus Yehuda, and at that time, so the Melech there was a Melech of Yisrael, of Yehuda rather, whose name was Melech Yehoshaphat. Yehoshaphat, the Torah reports, was a pretty good guy. He wasn't one of the great tzaddikim like Chizkiyahu, but that could have been Mashiach. But he was a good guy. He was a religious guy. He kept Torah mitzvahs, but he's criticized in Tanakh for allowing people to sort of do their own thing and be secular and like a liberal. It was everybody could do what they want. But he was a Jewish guy. I mean, like he was, some of these Malachim like Menashe were like terrible people. They were instituting, or forcing people to worship Avodah Zarah. He wasn't that type. But the job of the Melech was, of course, to protect Klal Yisrael in times of war. And in Divrei Yamim, you have some detail here, Divrei Yamim Beis, Perikaf, we know Vayihi Achrei Chen Bo Bnei Moav Ubnei Ammon B'Moav Me'Ammonim Al Yoshafat L'Milchama. The Arab nations around us, which would be Ammon and Moab, which is sort of like Jordan and Syria. Ammon, yeah. So they came to do war on Israel, and they decided to attack Yehoshaphat. So this was, let's say, 2,500 years ago. So if anybody wonders if we were here or not, they were already killing us in Eretz Yisrael, the time of Eliyahu and Navi and Yehoshaphat HaMelech, and who? Moab, Ammon. You got to be careful here. There's a big army coming against you. Aram. Now, Aram where's Aram? Yeah, like towards Turkey. Aram Naharaim, that's where Avraham Avinu, like the Tigris Euphrates, right? Aram Naharaim, two rivers. So that's up north. I'm not sure. I don't know if we know exactly where it was, but look at this war, surrounded, like from all many fronts of battle. And right now they're in the Yam HaMelech, like by the Yam HaMelech Ein Gedi, coming to attack Yehoshaphat, who was near Yerushalayim. So this was a war that was happening. No internet, no drones. But they came to tell them that, these guys are coming in quickly. But it's important before we get to our story. Vayira v'yitain Yehoshaphat es panav lidrosh la'Hashem. The first thing that Yehoshaphat did is says, "I'm going to daven," which is good. Vayikra tzoim al kol Yehuda, and he called for a tzom in all of Yehuda. Vayikavsu Yehuda levakesh ma'Hashem. He was a Melech Yehuda, and they made a day of tefillah. Gamikol Ore Yehuda bo levakesh es Hashem. It was a matzav of davening and war. Vayamod Yoshafat B'Kal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim b'Veis Hashem Lifnei HaChotzer HaChadosha Vayomer Hashem Elokei Avoseinu. This was a tefillah. Hashem Elokei Avoseinu Haloi Ata Hu Elokim B'Shamayim V'Ata Moshel B'Chol Mamluchos Hagoyim Uviyadcha Koach Ugvura Ve'enim Chalis Yatzeh. This is what he said. I'm elaborating on this because it's so important as history repeats itself. He gave us this land already from the time of Yoshua ben Nun. Avraham, you gave it to the children of Avraham. This is our land. We lived here, we built here. Mikdash l'shem chalemar, we built a bayis Rishon, yeah. Im tava yaleinu ra cherev shvait. So now what's going to be? These enemies are going to come and destroy us. V'nizak elachem mitzaraseinu v'sishma v'soshia. And that was the story. Who was the Melech Yisrael at this time? Yachziel. Anybody heard of him? Okay. Don't say I never taught you anything. Yachziel ben Zechariah ben Benaya ben Yeiel ben Matanya Halevi min Bnei Asaf. So he was a Rasha. But he had a heck of a yichus. Yachziel ben Zechariah ben Benaya ben Yeiel ben Matanyahu Halevi ben min Bnei Asaf. He was the king of Israel, and Yoshaphat was the king of Yehuda, divided in Eretz Yisrael. So here, I skipped to get to the main point that we want to make here. Yoshaphat had an idea as to how to win this war. Yoshaphat. It was probably, by the way, most of the Malchei Yehuda were military geniuses, as it was. I saw that in the Metzudas Sea in some places. They were Gaonim and Milchama. So his idea was that, this is a little bit Melachim, a little bit here, just tell you the story. His idea was that, remember the enemies in Gedi. So everybody knows the map of Israel a little bit. So the enemies in Ein Gedi, in Yerushalayim, and he said, let's go down to the Red Sea. Etzion Gover is on the Red Sea. Etzion Gover is Eilat, or sort of Gulf of Aqaba, right? That's Etzion Gover. Let's go down to the Red Sea and let's build ships and take the ships through the Red Sea and get to, I would imagine he would want to get through the Mediterranean, somehow over to the Yam HaMelech and attack the Jordanians and the Syrians. That was his plan. I spent time a while ago trying to work out like the geographical plan of this. Maybe they had like a Suez Canal or something like that. But, or they were using the land bridge. It doesn't make any difference. Like around, yeah. I mean, this was in Etzion Govers. And,
From the north, like up the Mediterranean, up Haifa.
Yeah, and down. Yeah, that's the only thing it could mean. So, but he's Etzion Gover is a lot. That's where you're from, right? That's down there, Etzion Gover. You see now a sign Etzion Gover still? It's there. Etzion Gover, yeah. So that's down south, and these guys are at the Yam HaMelech, and Ammon Moav is sort of like across Yam HaMelech over there. So that's the war. How's he going to get ships? He wasn't so rich to have ships. So he had an idea, I'll make an alliance with Achaziah Melech Yisrael, who was a richer king, but he was not a good man. And together we'll build ships. So the Divrei Yamim tells the stories. First of all, Yoshaphat had a problem. It says here, Achabamos Leisaru. He did not legislate against the Avodah Zarah. So where in Achaziah's, I mean, this was what was going on at that time. In Achaziah's territory, he pushed. They were Ovdei Abal. He pushed Avodah Zarah.
Bama is Avodah Zarah or it's Tasha?
These were Bamas for Avodah Zarah. Clear. V'oid ha'am lo yechinu levavam le'elokei avoseichem And the people were not holding spiritually. They were not holding spiritually. We're talking about Yehuda. So what happened over here was, get the exact pasuk, please. Eschaber, so Yoshafat said like this, Eschaber Yoshafat Melech Yehuda im Achazia Melech Yisrael. I'm going to make an alliance with Achazia Melech Yisrael. You would think this is a good thing, right? So here you have where unity between the two kings of Klal Yisrael, actually a bad thing. Why? Because Achazia was a Russia. It was an Avodah Zarah. So it was a bad thing. Who, says the Torah, Hirshia Lasois? The who, is a machlekes here if that's going on Yoshafat or on Achazia, but they were both did a bad thing. Vayechabreu imai, made an alliance with Achazia, Lasois aniyais. Let's make ships. Laleches Tarshish, this gets even more confusing, and the ships will head towards Tarshish. Vayasu aniyais be'etzion gaver. And there in the Eilat area in Etzion Gaver, these two kings made ships. Vayisnabe, at that time, who was the Navi of the Bnei Yehuda? Vayisnabe Eliezer ben Doidavahu mi Maresha al Yoshavat Lemor. That was his name, Eliezer ben Doidavahu. They don't know a book I have named after him, so he's not a famous Navi. This is it. This is his Nevuah. And he said as follows. This is our limud. Kis chabercha im Achazyahu. The minute that you teamed up with Achazyahu, paratz Hashem es masecha. Hashem will destroy your actions. What's he actioning? He's actioning for the Bnei Yisrael, trying to save this country. No, paratz Hashem es masecha vayishavru aniyos, and right there in the Red Sea, these ships will be knocked right out of the water. The Houthis. V'lai atzru. I mean, they're probably, I would guess, chitim amar v'lei atzru laleches al tashrish. Vayishkav Yoshafat im avoisa. Point is, this is the story of the fallen ships of Yoshafat, and the reason they fell is the key word Chazal say is behis chabercha, because he made an alliance with the Russia, with the Ovdei Avodah Zarah. And he had the money, and he had the know-how, then he had the military might, he had the navigational know-how, but you don't make a deal with Achazyahu, and when you make a deal with Achazyahu, this is the Navi, Eliezer ben Doidava, Zachor Latov, this was his prediction, this is going to be your downfall, and so it was, Beis Chabercha. Yeah. It's not a question of what you're allowed to do or you're not allowed to do. It's a question of what will work and what will not work. Nefesh tells you what you're allowed to do. Yoshafat went down in history as a decent king, but he did not win this war, by the way. We lost, if you look, we lost thousands of people in this war. Back to Reb Tzadok, who just throws away this little drasha here. How do I know that you're not allowed to be mischaberim rishayim afilu lemitzvah? Once again, that's the chiddush of Reb Tzadok. Al tischaber in Russia we know for a long time, but he tells you, how do we know you're not allowed to be mischaber in Russia afilu l'dvar mitzvah, even for it's a good thing? The answer is mefurish b'mechilta, because it says in the mechilta mefurish k'mashin namar behis chabercha. The whole thing is a quote from the Navi Eliezer ben Doidavahu. He's the quote. Behis chabercha, because you teamed up. Va'af al pi shenis chaberimai, and even though, what was his alliance? His alliance was Lilchem neged Aram. The whole thing was to protect Israel in wars. Next proof, and here it starts to get a little more interesting. Well, that was pretty interesting. Benhemar also says in Mishlei, a pasuk in Mishneh, Shlomo HaMelech says, B'ni al telech b'derech itam. Shlomo HaMelech is warning us about going on the way with Rishayim. cooperating and creating alliances with Rishayim. So he says, B'ni, al telech baderech itam. Don't go on the way with them. So what does that mean? So it says, Reb Tzadok, a very important underlining yesod, Mikol Makayim, whenever you find derech b'sefer mishlei, whenever you're going to find the word derech b'sefer mishlei, you're saying leimer derech hatayr v'amitzvos. The usage of the word derech in the Sfarim, all the Sfarim, by the way, of Shlomo HaMelech, mishlei shir hashirim, Kehillas. So all that always derech refers to derech haTorah. I found the Gross says this in Shir Hashirim. He says it here in Sefer Mishlei. So what does it mean? What does Shlomo HaMelech mean? Let's not lose the plot. He's saying, B'ni al telech baderech itam. They're telling you, look, you're going to build up more Torah. You're going baderech. You're going baderech. And they're telling you this is a great thing. Al telech, this should be like, B'ni al telech baderech. Don't go with derech itam. And derech, Reb Tzadok says, and that's for Torah. That's for the purpose of Torah. Nevertheless, you don't do Torah together with Rishayim. This brings to everybody's minds many, many questions. I'm not going to answer these questions. Everybody's just as smart as I am over here. But I'm just saying, like we got already from in a few minutes from the boats, the Houthi explosions in the Red Sea to Al Telech B'derech Itam.
Sorry, I want to clarify that originally we were talking about the brothers are, and now we're talking about the night Torah mitzvahs. So who are the Rishonim in the night Torah mitzvahs? The one who wants to do Torah mitzvahs?
No. Even if you're going baderech, meaning what does it mean? It means like I want to build a chesed organization, but I'm getting my money from some kind of group of Rishayim. So Shlomo HaMelech says it's not going to work out for you. And what you asked before is a very important question. Nowhere, I mean, there are halachas, but nowhere does it say it's usher. It's just not going to work. Yeah, I mean, there is halachas about taking money from Rishayim and non-Jews and all. There's halachas about it, but that's not what he's talking about here. What he's talking about here is you're building something. It needs to be pure. And like the thing is like this. The way I understand it is, if you're gonna build something, so there's a lot of ways to build it, but if you want it to last and to be authentic and to have the holiness and the siyata d'shmaya that you need, so then you have to make sure that every brick in it is holy. Divasle. You know, the Marsha says that in Sanhedrin, I think, Marsha says that after he's saying a long thing, but he says a long arichos pshat in the Gemara, he says that he's seen in his life shuls, beautiful shuls and batei midrashos fall apart, like physically fall apart. Listen here, because it was built with money. Part of the money came from Rishayim. And specifically, he says it came from Gezalakum. That's what he says. He says it came from Gezalakum. This building will not stay. It'll stay for a while, but it's like having like asbestos or something in the walls. Like if you have Gezalakum in those walls, it's not going to last. Yes, sir.
Is this different or
So let's get to mitzvah b'aver even better. Even better. The concept which we talk about here a lot is avera lishma. But let's first do the next paragraph. Reb Tzadok continues. Amru Chazal. It's a Gemara in Yoma Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Gabe Yosef. When it comes to Yosef, it says Liyos Ima. Okay. Yosef gets sold to Mitzrayim, to the house of Potiphar. The house of Potiphar was called such. Potiphar, the house of Potiphar. He was a Sris Paro. He was a big minister in Egypt. Egypt was a big empire. he was a minister. He was one of the big shots, and they had a very, very special slave. Chazal say he came to Mitzrayim. He was a very expensive slave, good-looking, good-working, brilliant slave. Where do you get a slave like this? And he was sold to the house of Potiphar, like the house of lords, like the house of Potiphar. And there he was in this mansion in Egypt, serving the house of Potiphar. And everybody knows the simple story that the Ashes Potiphar had a flame for him and kept on running after him, and Yosef kept on running away from her, and the lashon of the Torah is like Shamay La. He didn't listen to her with all of her what's the word? With all of that, he didn't listen to her. Lishkoi vetzla liyois ima. He didn't listen to her to lie with her, to be with her. So Chazal, Medayik in every word, what is lishkoi v'ima? Liyois ima. So, our imagination can maybe answer the double lashon, but let's do what Chazal say. Chazal say in Yuma, he didn't want to be lishka vitzla, that was in this world. Liyois ima, he didn't want to be with her in olam haba. Who's going to Olam Haba for the story? With Olam Haba. Maybe Yosef, somehow. But Ashes Potiphar, she was a Russian. We don't even know her name. So there's Chazal Yodrasha here that he's looking at this lady who's a very powerful woman and a very aggressive woman and making all kinds of appeals to him. And he doesn't want to be with her, and he doesn't want to be with her. He doesn't want to be with her here, and he doesn't want to be with her there in Olam Haba. Maybe, says Reb Tzadok, when the Gemara says he doesn't want to be Liyosim, he doesn't want to be with her Olam Haba, he means I don't want to be with her in Gehenna. That's also Olam Haba, right? So says Reb Tzadok, Olam Haba, another klal, like we just had one of Mishlei, Olam Haba hu rak kibul sachar v'lo yoinish. Does that ain't nikra olam haba? So we have a vocabulary lesson. Gehenna is not called olam haba, even though for many it is the world to come. But it's not olam haba. And the reason is not because it's not haba. The to come part is the Maharal explains this. That not because it's not to come. It is to come for many people, but it's not an olam. Gehenna is not an olam. It's not a world to come. Like there's olam hazeh, this is a world, and there's olam haba, that means heaven. It doesn't mean hell, because all the Gehenna is, according to Chazal, as the Maharal explains, all the Gehenna is a void. It's a place with nothing, and it's for people that are void. So void goes to void, and that's what Gehenna is. It's not a the lashon of Maharal figured out one day. He's not really a Metzius Gehenna. It's like more of a, I guess it's real, but it's not it's impossible for us to understand completely because it's spiritual. But Olam Haba, that's a real thing, like where you get schar, that's a Metzius. Just like there's Olam Hazeh, there's Olam Haba, but Tzadikim Yoshvim, V'Atrashem, B'Roshem, Nana Miziv Ashchina, that's all real. Chaim asked, "What about why is this world so real? Why do we consider this real?" But that's for a different time. Says Reb Tzadok, where's the Olam Haba? Back to the question over here. Yosef says, "No, I am not going to sleep with you, O wife of Potiphar, as mighty as you are, as beautiful as you are, as rich as you are, because I don't want to go to Olam Haba and sit there with you." And it's a pellet. So says Reb Tzadok, now, let's watch this. Shebe'emes, the truth is, Yosef nasabita. That gives everybody a cringe when we get there in Kehillas Hatzadik, right? What was her name? Osnas Bas. Rashi says, who Potiphar? That's the same Potiphar, same guy. So he ended up marrying the daughter of this woman who he resisted and was chasing. Now, of course, we know the story that she framed him, and he got thrown in jail for this. And he was in the dungeons of Mitzrayim, and then he came out and he became the Mishneh Lamelech, the viceroy of Egypt. So that's the story with Yosef. And as soon as he came out and he went free, it seems like he made a beeline to the Shadchanim, and they said, okay, yeah, she's not available, but her daughter is. Okay? Asnas Bas Potiphar. So what's going on here? And the answer is, says Rav Tzadok, that Yosef had to marry Asnas Bas Potiphar. Why? Mihem Yotze Shevet B'Yisrael Mashiach ben Yosef. Because from them would come Mashiach ben Yosef. The Yosef part is, we know, it came from Yosef. So in other words, from them came Menashe and Ephraim. And from Menashe ben Ephraim came Mashiach ben Yosef. Now in this base medrash we talk about Mashiach ben Yosef too often. But let me just explain briefly that it's a mystery thing, Mashiach ben Yosef. The Gemara hardly speaks about it. The Gemara is one line in Sukkah where it says that let's daven that Mashiach ben Yosef should not die in our day. When was he born? Who is he? What is he? And it wasn't until l'chara, this was not elaborated until much later. It was like a mystery thing for years, just a little history of Mashiach ben Yosef, and for obvious reasons, became popular again. The idea became popular again pretty much in the time of Rav Kook, when he was talking about like where are we in history in terms of the ingathering of the exiles and Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Medinas Yisrael. He was not alive during Rav Kook was not alive during the establishment of the state of Israel. He died earlier, so he never talked about the establishment of the state of Israel as we know it. He never gave, as I point out often, even though it's attributed to him, he, or as far as I know, any posek or gadol, gave some kind of a heter to create a secular state of Israel and Eretz Yisrael, maybe a religious state, Chovevei Tzion, and something like that. But it happened, So the only one I know of was his son, Rav Yehuda Kook. So he had some Kabbalah to say about the modern state of Israel. But what Rav Kook did say, and he said and he wrote, that he said that the what's going on here in Eretz Yisrael now, 1930, 1920, is a manifestation of Mashiach ben Yosef. He actually said this. I believe that Rav Kook came to Eretz Yisrael from the day that Herzl died, 1914, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it happens to be Shemayim. No. And and then he ended up like it was his first, rabbi gig of saying a hesped for Herzl. And this hesped for Herzl, which is written word for word, if you read it, he didn't say very much, but he didn't talk about Herzl at all. But he talked about the tkufa that we're living in, and the tkufa we're living in, he called it a tkufa of Mashiach ben Yosef. People that don't know how to read say that he said that Herzl may have been Mashiach ben Yosef. He never said anything like that. It's just Stam never would say such a thing. I mean, maybe he said it, but he didn't say it. It's not in his hesped. It's not in the words of the hesped. And this is one of those things that were never revisioned, if anything, the other way. But what he said is that could be Mashiach ben Yosef is a concept. In other words, of course, there's a person, but it represents a concept. So just to explain it briefly, the concept, which is not original to Mashiach ben Yosef, it's all over the Gra, to Rav Kook. It's all over the Gra. It's all over Rav Tzadok. It's all over the place, this Mashiach ben Yosef. But significant to note that the original conquering of Eretz Yisrael was done by Yoshua ben Nun, who was from Shevet Yosef. And the building of the Ruchnius of Eretz Yisrael in terms of the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, that was by David HaMelech, who was Yehuda. There's a difference between Yoshua bin Nun and David HaMelech in the sense that Yoshua bin Nun was from Shevet Yosef, Shaul, of course, but Yoshua bin Nun was from Shevet Yosef, building one thing, and David was building another thing. And the difference is like this: that Yosef is a sort of I'm using this word because I can't think of a better one. Yosef was a secular infrastructure builder. So Yosef built Goshen for the Bnei Yisrael. He lent his genius to building the whole Egyptian financial situation. Yosef was a tashtit builder. That's what Yosef was, and therefore Yoshua ben Yosef, if you will, came and conquered the land, created tashtit. And this, the Chazal talk a lot about with his relationship with Rachav, Azona, etc. Therefore, as time goes on, the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef is that before there is a geula, as we've all been waiting for, before there's a geula, first there's a tashtit, infrastructure building, which goes on in Eretz Yisrael, which can absorb Jews from all over the world. And create a situation where Jews can live here once again. So it's not hard to understand why these days people talk about Mashiach ben Yosef a lot. So it's interesting, though. It's interesting. So where did this Mashiach ben Yosef come from? Mashiach ben Yosef came from Asnas Bas Potifar and Yosef Hatzadik. Remember, Yosef was Midas HaYesod, so Yesod means down to earth. David was Midas HaMalchus, one more, right? Chesed Gvura Tiferes Netzach Hod Yesod, touching ground Malchus, David HaMelech. So first you have the Tashtit, and then you have the Malchus. One's coming from on top, and one's coming from the bottom. It's very interesting. The Yosef Haya b'Mitzrayim. So this all came from this relationship. So comes Chazal, and they say, I brought you the Chazal here in Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah is right there in Parshas Vayeshev. The Medrash Rabbah, fascinatingly, asks, that means that the Amoraim were talking about the juxtaposition of the story of Yehuda and Tamar, which doesn't seem to have a place here, and the story of Yosef and the wife of Potiphar. It's just like right there in the middle, all of a sudden we have a story. Mechiras Yosef, threw him to the bar, sold him to Mitzrayim. Okay, station identification. Now all of a sudden we're talking about Yehuda and Tamar, and that whole story of Yehuda and Tamar, where Yehuda gave into an action of znus. Simple as that. And right away we get the next similar story, which is the story of Yosef and Ashes Potiphar, where Yosef did not give in to the action of znus. Yehuda gave in to the action of znus because he saw that from this will come Mashiach ben David. Yosef did not give in to the action of znus, and that was his argument that she belongs to somebody. He did not give into the argument of znus because even though it's going to bring Mashiach ben Yosef. So the reason why these two stories are right next to each other is because it's the same story. One is coming with Mashiach ben David, and one is coming with Mashiach ben Yosef. And in fact, as Rabbi Tzadok points out, Bekitzer l'shoinoi, as he points out, and in fact, Yosef ended up marrying Osnas, who was the daughter, because what happened was, as Chazal say, let me just read you the Medrash for a moment here. Medrash is in Parshas Vayeshev, Perek Pei Hey. Beis says, Vayhi Ba'esahi was just at the same time that Yosef went down to Mitzrayim. Mipnei ma hismich parasha zu lezo. Why are these two parshas put together? Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Lezer, Omer, Kedei lismach yirida liyirida. Vayered Yehuda, vayered Yosef. Rabbi Yochanan, Omer Kedei lismach haker lahaker. Rav Shimon bar Nachman Omar. Rav Shimon bar Nachman, and this is how the Medrash ends up. No, this is Kedei lismach ma'aseh Tamar l'maaseh ishtoi shel Potifar. We need to look at these two stories in the same place in the Chumash. Torah is so beautiful. You got to see these two stories together. The story of Yehuda and Tamar and the story of Ishtay Shel Potifar. Listen to these words. Ma zu l'shem shamayim, av zu l'shem shamayim. Now, who are we talking about? Ma zu l'shem shamayim Yehuda.
Well, Vadai, Yosef was l'shem shamayim.
Okay.
So the Kiddush must be that Yehuda.
He didn't do it. Well, was l'shem shamayim the what?
So he did do it. But that Tamar was l'shem shamayim.
Who's the zu and who's the zu? And? So she was L'Shem Shemayim. Okay. No, I mean, just until now, I thought she was a Russia. But a L'Shem Shemayim Russia. Okay. And what? This matters. Okay, let me read the Medrash. Let me read the Medrash. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, just follow along. Chaisa b'astrologian shalah. Her astrologers told her. Says it different. Doesn't say astrologian, does it? Is that the word? Is it astrologia? I thought they use Rashi is a different word. Anyways, we all know what it means. So she was surrounded by these astrologers. And they saw that she's going to have a son. However, this doesn't show that she's L'Shem Shemayim. This shows how astrologers mess up. You know, astrologers are very famous for almost getting it right. Like so there was an unclarity here. I mean, you're dealing with all the planets and everything's complicated. Like yodas imimena. She didn't have clarity, as Rashi says, whether she's supposed to give birth to Mashiach ben Yosef. Basically the question is it her or is her husband? That's really the question, right? Because is it her? She knew it was the base Potiphar. So the base Potiphar, does that mean her? So it comes out that, it turns out that her whole chasing after Yosef was not like a sexual thing, but her chasing after Yosef was that she was concerned that she should give birth to Mashiach ben Yosef.
When he refused, she'd have to try that in Bapto.
Right. Now, I don't think, right, I hard for me to believe that L'Shem Shemayim means L'Shem Shemayim. Like, but what, I think what, well, yeah, like astrologers deal with mazel, right? So that's what they're dealing with, mazoles. Now, mazoles are the constellations, that's what it means. Simon Tov, Mazel Tov, Yelana, we should have a good Mazel Tov. Whenever you say Mazel Tov, we mean astrological formations should be good at this moment that the two of you are getting engaged. That's what we're wishing everybody. Mazel Tov! Talk about stars and stuff. Now these right? So these astrological, what the astrologers are able to see, let's say something farm. What the astrologers were able to see is that you and Yosef, or something about the house of Yosef and the house of Potiphar, are in the same mazel. And therefore, you should get married. They're in the same mazel. We would want to before you make a shidduch. It'll be a good thing to find out. Because when you start having, Aries marrying Scorpio or something, wow, you get a mess. Next thing you know, you're in the rabbi's office. These are difficult things. But you're in the same mazel, so you're in the same mazel, you have the same interests and all that, I guess. That's good. So what she probably said is that, like, I need to marry this guy. This is the right mazel for me. In reality, it wasn't her that was in that mazel. This is where the astrologers messed up a little bit. It was Osnas Bas Potiphar. Now let me just throw in another chazal here, and that is that who was Osnas? So Osnas was the daughter of Dinah, chazal say. So Dinah was raped by Shem and given up for adoption, and it was the Eshes Potiphar that said, let's adopt this little girl. So it comes out that Yosef married his niece. Is that okay?
Yeah. Is that still called? Is that still called base Potiphar?
What?
If she's adopted, is that still called base Potiphar?
Ki kol ha'megadloi, Chazal say, ki'ilu yotzra, because when you raise an orphan, it's as if you gave birth. So she really had nothing to do with Beis Potiphar, biologically speaking. What she had to do with Beis Potiphar is that she grew up there. So the astrologers really messed up over here because they're not hopping. And what she really was a child of rape of Dinah. First of all, she was Jewish, whatever that means. And she was a daughter of Dinah and Shechem. And,
Same place.
huh?
Pretty amazing how she got there. She ended up in the same.
That's God. So, yeah.
She was an orphan, right? Father skilled.
No, so you're the base Potiphar. Anyway, this is like Lahavdil movie, is it not? Like, in other words, so all of a sudden we have in the same house of Potiphar's random Sri Sparrow. Like, what is he's got in his house, maybe even at the same time. He's got, what's going on over here? I've got Dinah's kid and Yaakov's kid. And, so basically, uncle and a niece, which of course is mutter, al pi halacha, but we don't do it, by the way. The reason it's good to marry your niece. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying the reason why it's good to marry your niece, Chazal say, is because you're in the same mazel. The reason it's bad to marry the niece is because Rabbi Yehuda Chassid in the Sefer Chassidim Tzavav, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says you shouldn't marry your niece. And at the bottom there, Rabbi Reuven Margolius says on the daf, he says because it creates biological, what is it, like genetic issues. Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
Seems like there might be a common theme from impurity to impurity between Joseph marrying Asnas, which is basically raped by Shem, and you have Yehuda with Tamar, who we don't even know what happened.
Exactly what Rav Tzadok is teaching us. So here, now, but what's left? So here you have. Look, where does Mashiach really come from? Comes from Lot. From stone, and the most unimaginable kind of incest that took place over there. So, it's really weird, and you can't pretend to understand it, really. Although, I think we could have a little bit of a mahalach in it. But what you do see through all this is that Yosef had to marry, as you say, a victim of rape, but it had to be some kind of and it was almost Eshes Potiphar, and he resisted. Why did he resist? So Rav Tzadok's point is he resisted. This is the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing. She's somebody else's wife. So which is to me just like an amazing. I'll tell you something. A word of history that. Every false Messiah that there's been in history, there's always a woman there on the side that's justified because I have a bigger picture. It's always a bigger picture. Like you get your Aver,
Aver Lishma?
Aver Lishma. So this Aver Lishma, let me just finish this point here. What we're learning here is, because it's confusing, and I want to just make the confusion very clear, that what we're learning here is that on the one hand, like all these things that Rav Tzadok has been talking about for weeks, about how the bad is good and you really don't know what's bad and what's good. I mean, take a look at Lot, Moab, Midian. By the way, that's where the wars were, Ammon and Moab, it was the same thing repeating itself in history. That's where Al-Tatzer is Moab, because that's where the Mashiach is going to come from, Rus, David HaMelech. So that's like all coming through Shevet Yehuda, Boaz and Shevet Yehuda and all that. And it's all wrong, but it'll come out right at the end, even though it's wrong. But in the micro level, where Yosef has to make a decision, okay, I hear what you're saying, that there's going to become a Mashiach ben Yosef here, which is going to build the infrastructure of the entire Eretz Yisrael. Should I do it or not? All right, but the moment it became it wasn't right. It was not right. It can't be the Ratzon Hashem, period. But the moment it became all right, which was with Osnas Bas Potiphar, so he jumped to marry her and create the infrastructure that Mashiach ben Yosef brings to Klal Yisrael right before Mashiach ben David. And let's just finish the words here. We have 2 more minutes. Yes, sir.
Someone said that the women perished that Potiphar couldn't have children with, and maybe they weren't even married, in some sense.
The what?
They say that the word Potiphar
It's called a stress.
that he couldn't have children.
I'm not sure. Not sure. So this is the pshat. Says, so back to the words here. We have a few more words. Yosef ra gam kein zeh. Everything that the wife of Potiphar saw, Yosef saw. Shemimena yatsa shal shalosh gedula kazu. He saw that's going to come out. This is going to be the progeny of great asset to the Jewish people. Raklei rotza liyoisima. So he says, this is what he means when he says, I don't want to be with her in olam haba. I don't want to be with you in olam haba. Afilu olam haba. Even though we're doing a mitzvah, I don't want to be with you. Great lesson. Tegam shi Yehuda zina. Now back to Yehuda for a moment. Yehuda, same thing. Yehuda did a ma'ases nus with Tamar, and somehow or another he saw that that's where Mashiach ben David is going to come from. Degam she Yehuda zina v'yatsa mimenu malachim u'neviim. Everything came from Yehuda. V'hayaz nusai, and his nus Ratzon Hashem Yisbarach. His nus was the Ratzon Hashem. K'masha Amar Chazal, the Gemara darshans this in Soita Yudam and Beis, where it says Yatzas Abaskol, when Yehuda admitted to his crime, and he said Mimeni, this is mine. What he meant is Mimeni will be the Mashiach. Mimeni, it's going to come from me. Ula mitzvah yechashev, in history treats this as a mitzvah somehow. Avol Tamar. So what's the difference between Yosef and Yehuda? Good question. Avol Tamar haisa tzadekes. Okay, like at least Tamar was a tzadekes. So I could see sending spending my olam haba, eternity, at least if you're a tzadekes. Avazu, but this wife of Potiphar, by the way, which would have been a miss, right? Like, because it was really the daughter. It was really the daughter, so it would have been a wrong thing anyway. But to spend it with her, with a Russia in Olam Haba. So here we have a case of a Russia, a Rishanit, going to Olam Haba. So let me, we're out of time and there's 1,000 more hours to say, but let me just ask this question before we go. In Yonah D'Yoima, Mordechai said to Esther, go ahead and do this. Maybe for this you're a Malka altogether. And maybe this is why you're a queen. And she said, are you sure? They go marry Achashverosh. And she said, Masha avadati avadati. But what she meant to say there, Rashi says, that Seder, if I have to give up my Olam Haba for the Jewish people, I will do it. Now, truth is, she wouldn't have given up she didn't give up her Olam Haba, because we see that Yosef and they would be together in Olam Haba if it's for the survival of the people. But one wonders why Mordechai was pushing something that Yosef seemed to be against. I mean, Tamar was a tzaddikas, Achashverosh was no tzaddical. It was like, yuck. He was like like all the great empires and presidents. What?
Already stuck there. She was already in a relationship.
Achra Maisa. So it's already b'diavad, but she didn't want to.
Right.
Karkoila minus.
If you want to declare whether or not this is like.
She was a woman. So let me just end off by just reading you this Gra, which I've read to you. Gra says like this. This is what Shoal was talking about. Avera Lishma. This is in the Keser Roish, Kuf Lamed Beis. This Rav Chaim is saying something for his Rebbe to grow. Avera Lishma, Amar Rabbeinu. Avera Lishma, Leihuter Mizman Matan Torah Klum. What it means, by the way, the idea of Avera Lishma, meaning I'm doing an Avera, but it's for a greater purpose. This has, I'm just telling you, this has no makam in halacha at all. There's no case that a posek can tell you, okay, it's an Avera, but do it Lishma. There's no makam. There's no sifkat in the Mishnah Berurah. There's no Beis Yosef. There's nothing Avera Lishma. It doesn't happen. Avera Lishma, there's no relevance to halacha. But the Gemara says is like hutter mizman matan Torah klum, meaning nobody's allowed to give a heter for an Avera Lishma. L'hayiduim amar sha'ab'chol b'chlal Avera Lishma. We have to translate that because you can say everything is like Avera Lishma. B'im Kain says the Gra lama kol ataryag mitzvah. So what do we need mitzvahs for? Masha Lishma yaseh, shalei Lishma lo yaseh. You have one simple thing to think about all day long. When I'm going to do something, is it Lishma or is it not Lishma? Is my kavanah, my intentions good or are they not good? What do you need mitzvahs for? What's the point of the mitzvahs? Masha Lishma yaseh, shalei Lishma lo yaseh. I feel a mitzvah. Avol bemes, the truth is, acher matan Torah, once the Torah was given, when it comes to halacha, I'm adding, ein lazuz mikol Torah mitzvahs v'divrei Chazal. You just do what Chazal told you to do, and that's all. You like it or not. Loy lishayin al dasa yetzer. Now, matzino b'medrash, we find in the medrash shachanoich hayatayfer min na'alayim. The Chanoch in the Chumash was he sewed shoes, the shoemaker. Ubechol tzfira kiven yichudim upal lamala. And as he sewed the shoes, he had all kinds of Kabbalistic yichudim. And what that means is that you could take something which seems mundane and it could be very kadosh. You know, Rabbi Yisrael says, like, what was he thinking? Well, what yichudim was he thinking when he sewed the shoes? So the yichudim were, says Rabbi Yisrael, I'm thinking about my customer. I'm making sure he could walk well. I'm making sure that I'm not being cheap on the stitch. Yichudim, making the shoes like he was miyachid, the other guy. That's what Rabbi Yisrael says. Look for shipshat. But the point the Gra is making, kol ma'isa avos. The avos went with intention. They didn't go with halacha. Kol derchecha deheyu. Kol zekoyim matan Torah. And that's why Yaakov married, he goes on to say that's why Yaakov married two sisters, etc., etc. So then at the end, I just want to jump here. Masha, Amar Chazal, Gedola Aver Lishma, Mi Mitzvah Shalai Lishma. It's like such a good thing to do an Aver Lishma. It's bigger. And we learned this from Yael. So he says, you can't ask from there at all because Kavanasa, the Kavana of Yael was Lahatzil Kla Yisrael. And then he goes on to say, and that was the case with Esther also. And so let me just explain it this before we go home. Hatzol's nefashos. Somebody say here at the beginning, Pikuach Nefesh. So to create a Mashiach is not considered a Pikuach Nefesh. To save a guy that fainted in the street, for that you're Machal Shabbos and you do whatever you have to do, Safik Pikuach Nefesh. But if you're only doing it to bring Mashiach, that doesn't work. So what you need here in order to do, the Gra is saying that's not really Avera Lishma. In other words, Avera Lishma is I'm looking at the bigger picture, I'm not looking at the smaller picture. You're looking at halacha, Chai Bahem. And Esther, you can't learn from Esther Avera Lishma because Esther was doing Hatzos Nefashos. There was a decree, a Haman decree, a Nazi decree on the Jewish people, and she was able to fix it. Shamayim. So now I leave it to you to put together Esther and Tamar and Yosef and Mir Hashem the Geula. Thank you.
It says, but if you don't do it, so then we don't need you to do it. Then you shouldn't do it.
So when it comes to the greater good,
no, it will come from somewhere
he was
else.
saying there was a source.
This is the only way HaKadosh Baruch Hu can send the Yeshua by you going and doing an Avera?
I think what it means is like let's say you're in a Hatzalah. So the guy says, well, maybe somebody else will take the call. So that's not the right thing. You're supposed to take the call. Like you're not supposed to say, well, maybe some Chal Shabbos or something.
But that's not. But that's a halacha. That becomes mutter, or
that's what this Dolev Esther was.
Is it a chiyuv?
There's a
It's
Hatzalah.
an avera. It's absolutely an avera. She can't do it. Rabbi Chatzal Yom Makom Acher.
Right.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu can send this exact Chatzala in a kosher way. Why don't it go in a treif way?
Because it's when it comes to Hatzalah, it's not treif. In other words, don't think. I think.
It becomes mutter for her? It becomes a mitzvah for her?
Hear me out for a minute.
Is it an avera l'shma or is it a mitzvah l'shma now?
So hear me out of it. It's not about the biggest. That's what the Gra says. Not about the big picture. That's Haver Lishma. It's about the immediate picture, and therefore it's mutter. And not only mutter, but a schus. So when she was the Havamina of learning Esther is that this has to happen, but there's a million ways that it could happen. Kamashal says the Gra that it's not what's going on. It was a simple case of Hatzalah, and Hatzalah you're flying over Gaza. You're with all Shabbos. That's all. It's Hatzalah.
Some time back, the Rav told us about, I think it was Beersheba, there was a Rav who was only given a place for a mikvah on a shul. So he was, I think you said that the Gadol said to him, so you've got to do this Avera. You called it an Avera, okay, for the Gadol of the Kahal. So which is that?
By the way, I went with, I'll tell you the story really. I went with Rabbi Tzidkas Hatzadik. It's a mazel tov. So when he was a young man of about 50 or 40 or so, he wanted to bring Shalach Manus to his father, who was the Rav of Beersheba. Rav Kushlevsky was the Rav of Beersheba's father. And I drove him to Beersheba, which was a big deal. There was no hours to get to Beersheba 45 years ago, 46 years ago. Beersheba, so we're talking with, it was an interesting visit with Tzidkas Hatzadik and Kushlevsky Senior, the Rav of Beersheba. And Rav was telling a story, this is the story you're referring to, the Rav, Kushlevsky Senior, was telling the story that there in Beersheba they needed a new mikvah, and that mikvah they couldn't get a rishayon, like an ishur from the Beersheba municipality to build a mikvah. Like that's well, we understand. Can't get an ishur to build a mikvah except in a place that was allocated for kadosh, so which is where the old shul was. So you can knock down the shul and build the mikvah over there. So in Shulchan Aruch it says that he was telling the story in Shulchan Aruch. It says you're allowed to build a mikveh here, you're allowed to build a mikveh there. You're not allowed to knock down a shul and build a mikveh. That's one of the things you're not allowed to do. It's called the base merachatz. That's right in Shulchan Aruch. Not allowed to build a mikveh. But on the other hand, it was the only place to build a mikveh. So he didn't know what to do in Beersheba. So he traveled to the Chazon Ish in Bnei Brak. And he was a young Rav in Beersheba. He was Chazon Ish. Went to the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish told him you should build a mikveh in the place where you're not allowed to build a mikveh. So he said, but it says in Shulchan Aruch, you're not supposed to build a mikveh. So Chazon Ish told him, so it's kedai to Lashon Bratzach Abissal in Gehenim, as their Eilim Zahab and mikveh. It's kedai for you to burn in Gehenim a little bit, so that the Eilim should have a mikveh. Now this is so Rav Kushlevsky was telling us, it was Purim Day, telling us that he said to the Chazon Ish, why me? You're the one who's paskening. That I should build a mikveh here, and I got to go to your paskin. I got to get.
What was his response?
What? So he says that's the job of the Rav.
What?
That's the job of a Rav.
So which is that? Is that for the immediate Matthias, or is that for the bigger picture?
The rest is Pirush. I'm just saying,
But isn't that like right what we're framing right now? Like that.
Purim has been a half. Yeah, that's.